10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good golly, Miss Molly. Welcome to That 70s Rock Fan. Welcome to today's show, possibly an emotional one at times, a special commemoration, which something we couldn't let slip by, which first of all is the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings on June the 6th, but also, as my great friend Pope, who's with us today, reminded me, also this week marks the 82nd anniversary of the Battle of Midway. So two turning point events in this history of not only the Second World War, but you could say history itself, certainly modern history. We couldn't let these events slip by without discussing them, showing some images, talking about some of the things that happened, and also because a lot of the stuff we do on this channel is talking about obviously movies and so on, talking about some of the portrayals of these events in popular culture, such as movies and TV. So anyway, welcome to the show. Welcome to my panel today. We'll hopefully be getting joined by a couple of other people, and we are getting joined by at least a couple of other people in the guise of one person.
Hey,
hey, Roman. So welcome, Pope. How are you, my friend?
Doing good, man, and great to be talking about this because, like you say, this is a big anniversary for D-Day and also for Midway, and it's incredible to me that it's been that long and we still talk about it.
It is. I mean, 82 years. I mean, it's been a rolling succession of 80th anniversaries, of course, over the last few years. And, you know, a lot of those veterans are, you know, there's very few of them left in number now from World War II. So it's important, but it's always been important for me. I have a personal connection to D-Day, which we'll talk about later, to always keep reminding people of these events and the sacrifices that were made. But I'm glad you could join me here today, mate. Look forward to hearing your thoughts. Also joining for the first time, I believe, on screen in the show, Trucker Rob. How are you, mate?
Hello, I'm good. Thanks for inviting me. think we've talked before, but I don't think on your show. I think on Pope's show.
No, it was
I think
on my show, I think, yeah.
It was. So, but first time on my channel. So good to see you, mate. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you.
Also here, the man who has won World War II in multiple video games, Imperatus.
How's it going, man? Good to be here as always.
Good to see you, my friend. Yes.
I can't really dispute what you said because it's kind of a fact.
Indeed. It is. We were talking about some games beforehand, before we started. And I mean, video games, of course, are where World War II is often reenacted. So, and you get to take part. But thanks for being here, mate. But also joining us, our very good friend, man with a wonderful channel as well, Roman of the Empire.
Thank you for having me. I didn't know if I was gonna make it. It's been a fun and unique morning. So, but I'm happy to be here. I can hang out for about an hour or so, so I can't stay the entire time. I'm sorry about that, but yeah, I got. But I can be here for that long.
No worries, mate. We had planned to talk a little bit about D-Day first, and then do Midway. But as you're only got an hour, and you are our naval representative.
Yes.
That's,
I mean, that is one of the big ones. And I mean, obviously one of the major battles of World War II. But when they bring you into the Navy in boot camp, that is one of the battles that they harp on a lot because it was such a pivotal point in the war and the part that we played in that. So yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
No, thanks for joining me. And it's like this shows like the Village People. We need a Navy representative. And it's you.
I'm not saying anything.
I don't know who the rest are, but
damn it.
Just ignore me in the corner, please.
Yeah. So welcome to everybody in the chat already. And whilst it's a serious subject, and we do want to commemorate those brave people that took part in these battles. We'll probably have a couple of laughs too, because that's what we do, So
those guys would absolutely be breaking balls with us.
Oh, if you see some of the real life, I mean, there's so many books and documentaries and so on. But if you see read some of the those who survived, there was a lot of humor. Well, hell, you only have to read Spike Milligan's books from his experiences in the war to know that humor kept people going. It's one of the things, that humor, and obviously the local girls. In the case of the American forces in Britain. And we'll talk about that a little bit. So hail to Lord Thoth, our good friend. Who's... Sorry, that's my phone. I thought it silenced.
What?
It's spam.
What's
as well.
happening
Spam.
here?
Oh my God, what is that? I have to change my ringtone back. I used to have Bob Seger, old time rock and roll, but I've changed phones and I need to get that back again. Lord Thoth, who's obviously saying go Air Force at some point, and I agree, being Air Force myself. Anima Confusa is here. Good to see you. We're hoping to see Gary here at some point. We hope.
Oh, awesome.
Indeed. You'll slip in through the back door, I'm sure. Davina is here, the great Davina, who I'm sure will be posting facts throughout the show. Christian, our good friend Christian Delorme from Vinyl Revival. Good to see you, my friend, whose son is in the military. I'm not sure if it's Army, Air Force, or Navy.
Canadian Army, I believe.
Canadian Army. So obviously played a big part of Juno. In fact, some of the footage from my opening sequence was from a great Canadian docudrama called Storming Juno, which I've taken a lot of scenes from that. Who else have we got today? D-Bud Martin, Wrench of Wrenches, great friend of the channel. Good to see you, D-Bud. Yes, indeed. Smash that like button and share the stream. Snorty is here. Good to see you, Snorty. If I miss anybody, and we have a first time, Robert and Duvin. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Robert. First time here. I'm a huge Battle of Midway fan, and I want to see if you get it all right. Well, I'm hoping the others will keep me right on a lot of the facts, because whilst I've watched the movies and documentaries, I'm a little bit closer to the D-Day stuff than I am the Battle of Midway stuff. But not to worry. I'm sure we will talk about the details of that epic air battle as it really was. The ships just kind of stood there and waiting to get attacked or doing the attack.
Although one submarine did play a critical role, which we'll get to.
Yes, well, we will get to that. I mean, we could certainly, as Roman is only here for an hour, I think we may well move to the Midway stuff.
Don't change your show because of me. Dude, go with your plan. Go with your plan.
Books. Well, but I don't want to. It's not often we have a sailor here to exploit.
I'm not sure how I feel about that. I don't think I feel good about it. Is how I feel about it.
I feel great personally.
Well, as you say, we'll continue with we'll start off with D-Day, and of course D-Day is one day, but there were multiple operations spanning weeks and months leading up to it. We'll talk a little bit about what the position in Europe was at the time and the Allied build-up. Show some maps and stats, and then we'll talk about. I've got the pre-invasion deception operations are very interesting. So let's get into some of that. This is a great Ben Garrison drawing that I've used many times, by the way, which celebrates June 6th. So I always like to use this, and yes, indeed, we should remember. So we will talk about the beaches later in individually, but this is an idea, an overview of what we're talking about when we say D-Day. 5 beaches over something like a 45-mile or more distance, with American, Canadian, and British forces leading the way. There were forces from a lot of other nations involved too, and each of these beaches we'll talk about in more detail. And the Atlantic Wall that the Germans had built to defend it. So a lot of forces involved. There's various figures which I've seen on various sources about the total number, but here basically says 73,000 Americans and British and with Canadians. I actually read there was 21,000 Canadians involved in Juno, but so numbers do vary. Also, though, it wasn't just about the guys that were storming the beaches who were from various army and engineering and tank brigades and so on. There was aircraft, 11,590 aircraft, 14,000 more than 14,000 sorties involved, 6,039 sea vessels. A lot of troops deployed, a lot of deaths, which we'll talk about later, a lot of sacrifices. We did talk about before the show that the air superiority was huge. By this time, the consistent bombing of German forces in Europe, particularly a lot of it focusing on airfields, and the fact that the Battle of Britain had been won before in the air, meant that there was a massive air superiority on the day for the Allied forces, which played a huge part in it.
It was absolutely critical, because without that air supremacy, the entire airborne operation would have been canceled. Yeah. Because the Germans by this point had night fighters and were willing to use them, and that entire airborne drop would have gotten massacred.
A large part of the pre-bombing, 3 days of heavy bombing before the actual D-Day, was focused on German, not only German transport, like rails, roads and bridges, but also any airfields within reach that they could find. So David Marsh says, my grandfather landed on Juno Beach, June 6, 1944. Well, I salute him, David. And
my grandfather was there on Omaha Beach.
Yeah. And my Uncle Bill was on Gold Beach. So
we got 3 of the 5 covered right here.
That's right. We got 3 beaches covered. But yeah, an enormous number of forces and an incredible operation. Overlord was the overall battle, invasion of Normandy operation. On the day the Allied landings were Operation Neptune. Before there was Operation Fortitude, which was deception. This incredible build-up. There were 1.5 million American troops in Britain before this operation. Which explains an awful lot about British ladies and their one yank and they're off, as they used to say about their pants. But million and a half, not to mention all the Canadians, the other Commonwealth troops from other Commonwealth countries, the Free French, the Free Dutch, just an incredible number of men. And all this had to be kept secret or covered up, or deception operations. There was a massive increase in British divorces and illegitimate children, I read, because of the 1.5 million Americans.
Just think of all the paperwork.
Think of all the paperwork. Well, hell, Eric Clapton's father, a Canadian soldier. But, the parachutes, the paratroopers, almost 25,000 paratroopers involved, which we'll get into a little more detail as well. So just not to mention all the build-up that the Germans had done in anticipation. So a hell of a, Norwegian forces also. There was forces from many, many, many countries involved. So a hell of a build-up to this event, which would prove to be the turning point. Now, Stalin and Churchill and Roosevelt had met at that conference beforehand, which Stalin was constantly pressing for a Western Front to be opened because the Germans were heavily involved against the Russians in the east. So 2 fronts required. Yes, there were Allied forces in Italy, including my uncle David, who was fighting in Italy. They kind of got stalled at a certain point. But this was the big push that Stalin had been pressing for. But we knew that they had to return to Europe at some point to get the Germans out. So.
And Stalin was basically saying to the other two, like, look, we're doing what we can, but we're losing men at an unsustainable rate. You got to help us out.
Oh, absolutely. And we didn't, the details of that war in the East would be, you could do dozens of shows about them. But let's look a little bit at some of the things. First of all, who were the Allied leaders involved? Because I think that's important. So General Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower, a man who did like to get down in amongst the troops, as close as you could get being in that position, I think. He spent, for instance, when the first U.S. paratroopers, I think 101st, flew off that night, he was there till the final plane left. So he was the Supreme Allied Commander, but you also had, other commanders involved. I mean, Eisenhower was obviously a massive figure during, and post-war, but they also had the commander of the ground forces was Bernard Montgomery Monty, British commander. Had certainly seen a lot of action in North Africa with British forces and various other areas. This had to be a joint operation because of the different countries involved. In fact, it was being launched from the UK. So Monty had a large part to play, and there's been a little bit of criticism, of perhaps how some of that played out, especially with the taking of the town of Caen, but or not taking of it.
And also the reason that Patton was not involved in this operation.
Yeah,
those two could not stand each other.
That's right. Yeah. Indeed. So there was those things, and that happened on the German side too, which we'll talk about. The clash of personalities. Omar Bradley, of course, played a huge part. With Omaha, and then some of the operations to complete the taking of Normandy after. We did mention Patton, but he wasn't involved on D-Day, but he did get involved with the Third Army in France in the battle for Normandy after. So some huge personalities involved in this planning. But Bradley,
he was the whole reason they believed the ruse is that he was in command of, what was it, the First Army?
Well, they've created...
only existed on paper?
A completely fake army was created as part of Operation Fortitude.
And he was out there giving speeches to entire soccer stadiums and stuff full of mannequins in full uniform. It was one of the craziest ruses I've ever seen.
Yeah. We'll also mention French General de Gaulle, who the Allies kept out of most of the planning, indeed, of the actual operations on the day. It wasn't until several weeks later that he moved over to Normandy with some of the Free French. Some of the Free French did take part on the day, but he was kept out of a lot of this for whatever reason. But those were some of the key players involved. But yeah, Patton was, as we're going to talk about Operation Fortitude, the deception operation was incredible and it's well worth us discussing. The Germans, it's worth talking about their position though. They didn't know, they knew something was coming at some point. So they built this Atlantic wall of fortifications all the way around Norway, down Denmark, through Belgium, Holland, right down France to the Spanish border. They didn't know where this was coming, but they knew it was. So they built these fortifications, the huge guns, gun emplacements, the anti-aircraft stuff, troops stationed all over the place, artillery divisions, tank divisions, a lot of, as we found out later, manned by very young children or very old men, or because they were running out of men because of the war in the East. But still, a formidable set of forces, and
the most unfortunate of them were a lot of Polish and Czech conscripts, essentially.
Yeah, they had conscripted people from countries that had been conquered to fight, and they were all too. You can see it in some of the video of the film of the time, the relief on their faces when they're taken prisoner, and they could just give it up and not have to be forced to die for Germany, you know. So that was the position, and as a result, what was going to be done about that? How could you breach that wall? How could you? Where were you going to land? These were all the planning considerations that had to be done. Lots of anti-aircraft guns, lots of emplacements like this. You still see them. They're all still there today. I visited many of them in the past.
I'm frankly amazed with what the Germans had set up, that the casualties, as high as they weren't a lot higher.
Oh, yeah. I mean, It could easily have been a lot worse.
It's just amazing to me that as many, you know, that, like I said, they were tremendous, but it's mind-boggling that they just weren't so much worse.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, they would have been a lot worse, but what's the guy's name? Is it Juan Garcia or whatever? Playing pretend spy for the Germans in England, kept assuring them that there was, you know, a second invasion coming. So they kept a lot of troops in other places as a result.
Yeah, that spy was incredible. You mentioned his name there. He had them totally convinced in Germany, and because he had some things that were right.
Yeah, just doing it for the meme, just for fun, basically at first.
Yeah, and then when they didn't act on something he gave them that was correct, the Germans, he castigated the Germans. He said, "I told you this was right, and you wouldn't believe me." So after that, they believed other things that were false. It was a brilliant operation. And forgive me if I don't know all the names, because it's a huge subject, and I've read up a lot over the years and watched a lot of the films.
And German counterintelligence was famously dog shit during this war. Yeah. They basically believed everything people told them.
Yeah. But at the same time, there was a formidable set of defenses that had to be breached in order to get into Northern Europe again. These gun emplacements and so on, and all the other stuff that the Germans had their own problems with personalities. You had von Rundstedt and Rommel did not like each other, did not agree. Rommel should have been in total control, but they put von Rundstedt above him. Rommel was in the end only responsible for the beach defenses, the coastal defenses. He wanted German troops stationed right up at the coast. He wanted other things stationed there. Von Rundstedt disagreed. He wanted them held back. Holding them back meant not only could they be bombed easier, but they could be you could cut off their way to the coast when things did happen. So Rommel was,
of course, you know, they were equally in command, so neither one of them could make the decision. So, of course, von Rundstedt just phoned up his buddy Adolf Hitler and got him overruled.
So they had, Rommel probably could have done a way better job on his own. Just as well he didn't. But yeah, he did a good enough job as it was. So they built a ton of these coastal defenses to stop tanks and troops, and were all mined. The seas were mined, although that's a lot of sea to cover because they were trying to cover the entire Atlantic coast. But a lot of gun emplacements. So all that had to be taken into consideration and so on. But at the same time, I'm fascinated by the preparations that had to be made and some of the material that had to be gathered. So they had to build things like these massive phoenix caissons. I can never say that word. To use as breakwaters to build artificial. If you couldn't take, and some of they aimed to take deep water ports like Cherbourg, but if you needed to be able to create your own ports in effect, so they built many of these, which had to be then floated over to Normandy. And you can see the remains of a lot of them. I've seen them in person.
And like you said in the opening, the logistics of this operation were just absolutely insane.
Just an incredible set of logistics. Yeah. They had to build all these landing craft, the Higgins boats and the other landing craft they used, which were really just floating containers.
It was basically a dumpster with a door on the side.
Yes, indeed. And the guy at the back with steering it. The footage you see of them coming off these or being on them as they go over the channel, and the seas were rough. I mean, they almost called the whole thing off because of bad weather.
Yeah, they had such a small window to do this. It was delayed for 24 hours as it was, and if they'd had to delay it again, then they're pushing it off another couple of weeks. Which when you're dealing with all the intricacies of an operation like this, a couple of weeks is forever, and so many other things can change in that time period. So it was just the grace of God that allowed the attack to happen essentially on time.
Indeed, because if they delayed, that was going to be weeks lost to actually capture France and so on. The plan would have been really seriously impacted, not to mention all the people standing waiting to go. But the trout, you see it on the film of these guys in the boats, they're throwing up. I mean, I would have been puking within seconds. And as one of the guys said that was on one of these boats, he said, we were given on the ship and then on these, given we had the rations of 10 men. Nobody could eat anything because we were puking so much. It was horrible. And then you have to get off that with a huge pack and a ton of gear.
While getting shot at,
dropped off too early many times. Many men.
Oh yeah. They were done. Yeah, the water was too deep, so they were just with all their gear on. And now you're in 10 feet of water, and that's it.
Yeah, it's just incredible that we forget just what these guys had to go through often. But just the seasickness alone and the drowning, they drowned with the heavy packs. Some of them. Yeah,
just the sea motion alone, and the smell of diesel being burned everywhere will just make you sick in general. And you go through all that hell just to get to the beach where people are shooting at you.
Yeah, but the floating piers that they built as well, so they could offload stuff. I'd like to welcome Joe. How are you, mate?
I'm sorry I'm late, man. Ryan ran a little long today. So.
No problem, buddy. You're here now. We're just talking over some of the preparation, the equipment and materials that had to be built and prepared for these amphibious landings. Biggest amphibious landing in history still, I think.
Oh, my God.
Lord Tho says, if women were in charge in doing this, we would have won by 1942.
This is true, as we all know.
Yeah, so these floating piers. Now, actually, we talked about the weather. That a few days after the landings, there was huge storms, and a whole lot of this stuff got destroyed. Particularly in the Gold Beach, Aramanches area, a lot of those were destroyed, had to be rebuilt. So the weather was pretty horrible. But yeah, they built these. So Aramanches, where I've been, because the Gold Beach is where my Uncle Bill landed. They had to build all this stuff so they could get more than just the initial guys off the beach and start getting those divisions after division in, supplies out, more supplies quite the planning to do, basically building a huge artificial harbor on an open beach. So,
And when you look at how many things had to go right and in that specific order, it's amazing that any of this even worked.
oh, it's incredible. I mean, and as I say, the weather nearly screwed it up multiple times. But the breakwaters, they sunk ships to create them, the concrete Phoenix units. But it got done. It got done. Getting off the beach was one thing. Building all this was another thing. Also important, though, although they weren't invented or particularly created for this, jeeps were huge, lightweight, easy to carry, easy to get off the floating piers. It could be adapted with weapons and so on. So jeeps
And
were
just
huge.
rugged as hell.
Rugged as hell. They practiced going over these huge bumps to practice driving them. They knew what to expect.
Jesus.
General purpose vehicle.
My favorite story with these things was, in order to sell them to the government, basically they took one and drove it up the steps of the Capitol building. And for those of you who've ever been to DC, that's actually a pretty steep staircase.
Yeah.
And they just drove it up and parked it right out in front of the rotunda.
That's right. So they were hugely important in the war effort, but particularly in the days after Normandy and that battle to win Normandy, because it was by no means certain that would happen. Also, the British Land Rovers, same concept.
God, it's so ugly. I want one.
Yeah. My father loved Land Rovers. He was a big outdoors hunting, shooting, fishing man, and he had tons of Land Rovers over the years, and I hated them because they were so bare bones and horrible. But they're kind of neat.
It's the we have Jeep at home.
Yeah, these earlier Land Rovers, you had to double clutch them to change gear. You couldn't just change gear. You had to double clutch every time to change every.
My condolences.
Lord.
Yeah, they're neat Land Rovers. Great brand, still going today, honestly, but they're slightly posher now. You want ventilation in a Land Rover, you just take the canvas roof off.
That's it.
These matting machines were built, or matting devices, to try and cover the sand so you could drive vehicles up.
That's fascinating.
They had somewhat limited success. They had to get onto the beach themselves first, of course. So, but these giant matting things, laying out this matting. Then you had the flailing.
The mine flails.
The mine flails, which must have been scary as hell to be.
Yeah, I wouldn't want that thing driving at me.
I know. It's like a big beast. Like Snorty says, with the Land Rover, I love the pan being used to catch the leaking oil. Leaking oil was mandatory in all Land Rovers. Yes,
But no, if I see that thing driving at my position, I'll be like, "All right, look, I'll tell you where the mines are. Just make that thing stop."
Yeah, it's like a science fiction device. It conquered the world.
It's like H.G. Wells.
Yeah, but they were a big part of it to try and clear them out. Then they had the Churchill tanks with the flamethrowers.
Yep.
As God intended.
Yes, as God intended, the crocodile tank. That's what I would have wanted. I would have wanted one of those. I would love to have that in the driveway right now, in fact.
So from what I've heard from when they were used, like a lot of times the British would, basically squirt it just before they were in range of a German position, and the Germans would just go away rather than deal with that. They're just like, nope.
Yeah, I mean,
run away.
Yeah, Sherman tanks, obviously.
Tank.
Sherman tanks, huge part of these battles.
Best girl, 1944.
Against the Panzers, of course, but and all sorts of configurations as well. Tons of configurations you could have. You could have the ones that tore the hedges out of the way first, so because a lot of the fighting beyond the beaches was on these flat fields, partly waterlogged with the big hedgerows. So there was like Germans behind every hedgerow. So they had to try and get through those because they were sitting ducks. And
they didn't have a dozer blade specifically for that. So a lot of the engineers just cut up the tank traps that were on the beach and just welded them to the front of the tank.
That's right.
Jesus Christ.
Aircraft, of course. I mean, thousands of sorties that day, as we said earlier. You had the P-38 Lightnings.
One of my favorite aircraft of all time.
You had the, they were huge a lot of fighter bomber stuff. I mean, there was a lot of actual bombers, but a lot of fighter bombers, rocket launched stuff, getting rid of bridges, trains, German trains, roads. After German convoys, there was some of those convoys were absolutely decimated.
Some of the coolest artwork ever on the noses of these planes, too.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that one, 23 Skidoo. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now this one doesn't have it, but a lot of the planes had white markings on them, white rings painted to show they were Allied, so that the guys on the ground wouldn't just start shooting at anything randomly.
Those of you who are into the classic car scene, that's actually where the racing stripes come from after the war. Is a lot of the guys modding their cars were all aircraft mechanics from World War II. So they actually did it to mark other vets out.
Yeah, Hawker Typhoons was a British fighter bomber. They were used extensively. A lot of torpedoes and rockets dropped from those. And then, of course,
Oh boy.
an awful lot of paratroopers were being dropped, and the Dakotas, Douglas C-47 Dakotas. This is a Canadian Air Force one. 21,000 plus paratroopers deployed on the night before.
Jesus.
I think I read that half of them died.
Yeah, can you imagine jumping out? I mean, it's the job, but jumping out with all the anti-aircraft fire going off, watching the planes around you exploding, and the men, getting shot, just blowing up in the air. It's a lot. It'd be a lot. It's a lot to make your ass get out of that plane.
Yeah,
I don't know which would be worse: try to hit the beaches there or fly out of the airplane.
Both. I mean, we'll talk about it more because I got more photographs of the actual paratroopers later. But some of them, particularly the recon guys, they were just on a hiding to nothing.
The Pathfinders were absolute lunatics because they were going in ahead of the drop.
They knew before they even jumped out there had only a 50% chance of surviving. So,
of surviving long enough to set up the beacons, let alone until the drop showed up.
Yeah.
But a lot of Dakotas, I mean, the workhorse for many years in civil aviation afterwards as well, a workhorse aircraft. And one of my favorites, the Mustang, P-51 Mustang.
Yes.
Very, very pretty airplane.
Which is mainly here because of the Midway stuff as well. I mean, there was a lot of those involved too, I think. So, beautiful airplane. So, that's not all the material involved, but all this had to be compiled, had to be in Britain, ready to go. All those guys.
Not to mention the decoy stuff that they'd set up.
Well,
to mimic having all of these things.
So we're going to get
and such.
We're definitely going to get to that, Roman, because that stuff's, to me, Operation Fortitude, the deception operation, is fascinating.
I remember reading something too about the British seeing like the material requirements for the landing and just were like, "This is insane. There's no way we can do this."
That's right.
Meanwhile, the Americans just kind of go, military industrial complex go burr.
That's right. Just before we look at our own deception operations, the Germans had theirs. These are fake German aircraft that they built trying to deceive our bombers and so on. They also, but this is funny. This is about a real story. That World War II, the Germans built a fake wooden airfield with wooden aircraft, vehicles, and hangars to try and trick the Allies. The RAF, having known of the secret project for months, patiently waited for them to finish and then dropped a single fake wooden bomb.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I've never heard of that. That's the actual bomb.
Knowing the British, I'm only surprised it didn't just have "nice try, assholes" written on it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
I just love that. So their deception, they were working on their own deception, but we knew.
People say the British aren't funny.
Yeah. Hey, Gary, slipped in through the back door. Good to see you, buddy.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, cool.
Sorry I missed your excellent show earlier, I believe it was, with about Midway. We're going to talk about Midway a little bit later.
Yes, because he gets buried under the rug when it comes to this time of the month for D-Day, and it's like, no, it was as significant as anything was.
But we're definitely going to talk about it, my friend. Definitely.
Well, I just got off the phone with Dale Donnie. Wanted to say hi, guys.
Hey, Dale. Good. Yeah, it's good to hear that. Good.
Always glad to see you in anything, sir.
Yeah, Hail Dale. So we're all to be talking about Midway, but now we were kind of getting onto the deception side of things, which we just touched on, Operation Fortitude. And It's quite the operation. So let me show some of the stuff from that, which is some of it's quite funny. So Operation Fortitude, trying to make the Allies believe there was a north and a south. Part of it was, it's going to be Norway. Fortitude North. Let's make them believe we're going to land in Norway. So they had to build defenses there and station guys there. And Fortitude was so successful, as it says here, that Hitler actually thought Normandy was the decoy. So,
yes, imagine.
But Norway was one. So there was a whole operation around Norway, and then Fortitude South made them think quite logically. You would think in many ways, because it's closest to England, that the Pas de Calais was the real point of attack. I mean, it's the closest. Kind of makes sense. So the Fortitude was to make the Germans believe anything except it was Normandy.
That really should have tipped them off, though, because it made sense, and the U.S. is involved.
That's right. Let's go the hard way. So, but it wasn't just about the intel deception, which they had a lot of. There was like fake top secret plans were found floating on dead bodies, and you mentioned the spy. Somebody mentioned that spy earlier that the Germans trusted that we was feeding them some real information, but some false.
And they even dropped like mannequins, like with strings of firecrackers and everything, to simulate paratroopers up there and get the troops up there moving that direction.
So this is an interesting photograph because this is the London headquarters of Operation Fortitude. There's a certain gentleman here in the room, Wing Commander Dennis
the British in their tiny rooms.
Yeah. Wing Commander Dennis Wheatley, who many will know as the famous
a wee room for our meetings.
Yes, Dennis Wheatley wrote the books like The Devil Rides Out and all those other books that were made in the movies. Wing Commander Dennis Wheatley was a large part of Operation Fortitude. He knew how to write a good book, you see.
A book?
A book.
Book.
So,
he read a book.
So part of it was, as we mentioned and David's mentioning here, they made the Germans believe there was an entire army group that didn't exist.
That's right, with the inflatables and everything.
Yeah, and we all know you like an inflatable.
And of course, Patton was part of that ruse.
He was.
I don't know how he kept a straight face giving motivational speeches to entire stadiums full of mannequins and inspecting rows of inflatable tanks.
I know.
It was punishment. That was all punishment for what he'd done.
This Ghost Army there was false everything and false. They had guys walking into British villages with certain uniforms on, insignia that didn't exist, and talking about, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be doing that, and it was all bullshit. They'd come back 2 hours later with a different uniform on. The whole operation of that was going on.
And we did stuff similar to what the Russians do for like the May Day parades, where the same vehicles would be driving or driving through a square, and then taking back around and driving through again. So it looks like we had way more than we did.
It made them look, look like there was different units that didn't exist, and there was insignia for fake units. But here's fake aircraft. Tons of fake aircraft.
Did you talk yet about the Vichy?
Oh, not yet. No, but go ahead, mate.
Okay. I just want to make sure I didn't miss.
No, carry on. Yeah, go for it.
No, go ahead. I wanted to hear Pope talk about the Vichy French because we talked about it earlier. God.
Well, indeed, and there was Vichy French that were spies for the Allies and vice versa. Yeah, you couldn't. That's why they couldn't trust de Gaulle, not because they couldn't trust him. They couldn't trust any of the people around him.
Because they never show, by the way, in any of the movies, how many French were out there killing Allies.
Yeah,
it wasn't just Germans. Poles and Czechs. There were volunteer Frenchmen out there.
Yeah.
That absolutely supported the Nazi regime.
Yeah.
And of course, half the French resistance was busy turning in the other half of the French resistance.
Right. Communist versus nationalists.
There were also different type of leftists that they didn't like.
You give up. No, you give up.
I don't like your form of leftism.
That's right. Not to divert too much, but that's one of the reasons they relented to let General de Gaulle enter Paris, even though it hadn't been cleared yet. was because Eisenhower and Bradley and Patton agreed that they needed de Gaulle to go in because they didn't want any communist French resistance to take over.
Right.
So they had to let de Gaulle do that whole entering Paris, walk down the Champs-Élysées and all that, and have American drive-bys that he saluted to try and reinforce, the non-communist side of it. So, but this is like fake artillery, tons of that. This is, they brought in real vehicles, got all the tracks on the ground, and then brought the fake vehicles in and left them there to make it look like there was actual, or mechanized divisions existing that didn't exist. These are fake tanks, the inflatable tanks.
And can you imagine being the privates that were doing all this? You signed up to kill the Germans, and you're pushing an inflatable tank around a farm field.
Yeah,
can you imagine playing volleyball with one of those things?
So Read by Nature mentions the British TV show Allo Allo, which is a comedy, but it's about the French resistance and all the infighting in it. But I think that's the source of that meme where the two Germans go, "Are we the bad guys?"
Yes.
Oh, it is. I love that.
But this is actually, I'm pretty sure that the current military industrial complex would love an inflatable tank. I mean, they could sell it for millions.
Probably.
You could use one of these in your garden. Yeah, somebody says.
That's a great question. I don't know what happened to all these inflatable tanks. They were probably just scrapped after this invasion.
Stick that in your front yard. Nobody's going to. I would. Yeah. So I mean, millions of the tons of. The
look on that guy's face is priceless too. He's just like, I feel like an idiot.
Yeah, that's right. He's not real either. He's a cardboard cutout. He's inflatable. But yeah, Operation Fortitude, we could talk about that for days. It's just such a great operation. Even on D-Day itself, they sent 4,000 ships towards Calais, and they'd made it so that they all belched a ton of smoke that they didn't need to make it look like that was it.
Oh my God, you can buy the inflatable tanks for $300.
It was Mitchell and Webb as We Are the Baddies. Sorry, Read by Nature. I thought it came from Hello Hello. But yeah. We Are the Baddies. Hey,
I don't think that thing would pass inspection. I just got a feeling.
Yeah, somebody says the 33rd Waffen Grenadier Division of the SS Charlemagne were French. Yeah.
Which part is the part that you base whether it's level or not?
Well, you pump it up a bit more,
By the way, I just shared the link with you in the private chat for that video. If you guys want to watch it on your own, are we the bad guys?
It's Mitchell. Somebody, I thought it was. Read by Nature's more up on the British stuff these days than me. That's a Mitchell and Webb was the show that was on. Are we the bad guys?
He's one of the guys, one of the stars of that show that you and I talked about before. Would I Lie to You?
Yes, and I got
I love that guy. He's so freaking funny.
Yeah. So that was some of the prep. I mean, I know we're kind of, you could linger on that stuff forever, but it's just Fortitude itself is an incredible operation. We've not even touched on the naval deceptions that were going on.
And some of it was devious and really, really well thought out. Some of it sounded like it was out of a Looney Tunes cartoon.
Have they ever made a film about Fortitude? I mean, nothing big that I'm aware of. They should. It would be genius. That'd be a fantastic story.
It would be one of the best comedies ever written.
Exactly. You could play it in a, you could have a semi-lighthearted approach to this because you don't have all the heavy stuff that Saving Private Ryan has. This is the lie, the great lie that made D-Day happen.
Yeah, especially if you included the espionage stuff that gave it a little bit of drama on top of the funny stuff.
Mincemeat. I mean, good God, that was so well thought out.
Yeah. Hey, Snowdub, good to see you, buddy. Hope everyone's enjoying this chat in the stream. We can never do true justice to the people who sacrificed everything in this battle and the D-Day and the operations in Normandy, but we're doing our best to show some of the stuff that went into this most historic event, and we'll do the same a little bit later for Midway too. So yeah, and lest we forget, that's what we're talking about today is the sacrifices that were made. And we are all still many people are still extremely grateful for those sacrifices. So let's talk about D-Day itself. Operation Neptune, of course, was D-Day. They needed a full moon and they needed a half tide, so not a low tide, not high tide, a half tide at dawn in reasonable weather. It didn't look like they were going to get the reasonable weather, but eventually Eisenhower made the decision to go, and he wrote a letter saying, if things go wrong, this is my decision and mine alone.
I mean, just getting a decent weather in the English Channel in June is
Come on, man.
Anytime.
Come on.
Well, that was
man.
the greatest delay of what they were doing. It just the weather kept going to shit.
Yeah. And they, used multiple ports in England. Obviously, they had multiple destinations. Hell of a logistics operation.
Oh my God. Logistical nightmare.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Good Lord.
Just to get everything moving in the same direction must have been an absolute nightmare.
Yep. Quite incredible, really. And before the actual amphibious landings, there were 3 days of sustained aerial bombardment. And not only of military targets like roads, bridges, trains, railway tracks, supply depots, anything German that they knew existed that they could get to, but also actual towns. And there was a lot of, afterwards, there was a lot of French civilian deaths, as you would expect. The French resistance gave the message that this was okay, it's war, this is expected. So, I mean, some blanket bombing of to try and destroy that Atlantic wall, which was embedded in some of these towns. So 3 days of sustained that. There was naval bombardment of all the coastal defenses.
Including a story of the oldest surviving dreadnought and one of the coolest ships ever, USS Texas.
Yes.
Where she basically fired her entire 14-inch magazine, went back to England to get more shells, and by the time she came back on station off of Normandy, the battle had moved far enough inland that her guns could no longer range long enough to actually provide gunfire support. So instead of just saying, oh, well, I guess that's it for us, the commander of the Texas decided to flood her port torpedo blister and move this thing into as close as he could to shore without beaching it. Jeez. So he could continue to provide gunfire support.
Wow.
It's pretty good.
That's amazing.
It is. Luckily, there was air superiority in the Allied side. But these ships still came under fire from the German guns in the Atlantic Wall, and there were some casualties as a result, and some ships had to withdraw further back. And the weather being so poor, they couldn't always get to the targets they wanted. So whilst there was damage done, a lot of those defenses were still intact in Normandy. When the landings happened, so it wasn't a cakewalk at all. They did their best, but real life is not that simple. So, but yeah, 5 beaches, 2 British, 1 Canadian, 2 American. The British and the Canadians had looking from above the right-hand side. The Americans had the 2 beaches on the left. A lot of the British and Canadian objectives were to take Caen, and not Caen in the south of France, Caen, Caen in the north, because beyond that, as well as it being an important transport hub, but beyond that, there was a lot of flat ground. So if you could command that, you could get your tanks and other mechanized units in, if you can take that town into the heart of Normandy and then into France and then east into Germany eventually. So the Americans Americans were to take Cherbourg. Go ahead.
That Omaha Beach, why it was so difficult was because it had the worst layout.
Oh, cliffs.
The cliffs. The rest of the beaches, I mean, they saw a lot of combat, but Omaha Beach was the toughest because of the design. And if not for the Bangalore mines, those guys would have been screwed.
Yeah. Apparently, whoever put this slide together, and it wasn't me, I just took these from the internet has got the Canadian flag wrong.
Was it Martin? Because Martin does that.
My apologies, Tim.
He's mad at Joe and me today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Germans
Okay.
did blow roads, Davina. They did blow roads. They did blow bridges. Everyone was busy blowing up roads and build bridges and railways, then having to rebuild them temporarily to use them when they were in the. But yes, they did do a lot of that. Paratroopers we mentioned. So
You know how they blow bridges, right? First, you put on some lipstick.
Jesus Christ.
oh jeez. The paratroop operations, which began, and surely incidentally, there were 7,000 naval vessels took part in that bombardment and in the transport of troops and so on. 10,000 plus air sorties, and French resistance did carry out sabotage too. There were 20,000 plus paratroopers went first to inland targets.
Man.
To be linked up with the guys on the beaches. So the 101st Airborne were the first in, as they usually are, of course.
The legendary 101st. Yeah.
Including the recon paras. There were some of the. So the recon paras, the filthy 13. They were the very first in. You see them painting their faces. One of them was Choctaw, so they were. So this is apparently the inspiration for the Dirty Dozen as a name comes from the Filthy 13.
It is.
Yeah. So yeah, Gary would know more about that probably than me, but
Anything that's dirty or filthy, I know.
That's true. So these guys, I mean, they were the bravest of the brave. And I mean, 50% of them died. They lost a lot of their stuff, and they suffered so many heavy. The bad weather dispersed them. So instead of being able to link up with the landing forces, they got really dispersed. That was a silver lining, though, because the Germans thought there were more of them than there were because they were so spread out. So it did confuse.
They could also never tell what the actual point of the attack was because there really wasn't one. It was just a bunch of squads and platoons of paratroopers running all over the landscape, making a pain in the ass of themselves.
Yeah, and it's exactly. So whilst it was bad and it was hellish for those guys, and it was tough for them to link up with the guys from the beaches, it did cause. There was a silver lining, and it confused the Germans even more. And they still thought this was possibly a feint at first, and that Calais was the real thing. So a lot of confusion there. And of course, Rommel had that argument with von Rundstedt. So all those forces that could have supported at the beaches, the Germans, were way back because of von Rundstedt. So.
Hey guys, I gotta jump out. I'm sorry.
Oh no, mate.
Well,
I'm
it's
sorry
good to finally hang out with you, Roman.
Why am I so big?
So
because you are the Empire, and that's why.
That's what she said. I'm sorry you couldn't stay longer, mate. And we didn't get to the naval stuff so much at Midway, but thank you for being here, buddy.
Well, thank you for having me.
Tell us what you're up to.
I do appreciate it. So we're going into dark waters starting this Thursday. We are covering the Acolyte. So remember, we watch so you don't have to. So
Indeed.
we're going to be covering it for the next 7 weeks is what the show is going to be.
You're a better man than me, Roman.
We'll see. We'll see how this goes. We're this Thursday we got 2 episodes. They're doing a 1 and 2 drop, which is fantastic. I'm so happy they're doing that. So we'll see how this thing rides out. And if it turns out it's not going to be any fun to hate review it, then maybe we'll take a turn. But that's what we're going to be Thursday, 5 Pacific Standard. Like I said, for the next 7 weeks, that's the plan, is to be doing the Acolyte.
So is it a deception operation? Maybe it's not a real show, and this is just like a deception.
No, sadly, I don't think it is. I believe this is as badly planned an operation as they could have, and with Leslie Headland at the helm, what could possibly go wrong?
God, she's amazing.
What could possibly go right?
But she has a very strong jawline. So with that, gentlemen, I'm going to leave you. Thank you for talking about this very important topic. My wife's grandfather was at Utah. And he's one of those guys that survived the war but never really came back. So it's one of those, like many Lake Manning. So again, thank you for talking about this, and I will see you guys around the interweb.
Oh,
Bye,
thanks
care,
for being
Roman.
here, mate.
Later.
Take care. Take care, mate. Right. So
Before you continue, I got to take off as well.
Imp. Sorry, mate. I'm sorry to lose you.
Yeah.
I wish I could stick around. This is definitely a topic that's worth talking about. There's no doubt about that.
Well, thanks for being here as always, my
Being the
friend.
imperatives.
Mm-hmm.
What else are you up to? Got anything you want to plug?
Only thing I got going on for 100% this week is gaming tomorrow night. I'm not sure what channel we're doing it on because I don't know if Brahma's going to be around because of the Texas meetup.
All right. Well, keep an eye out for that. Was it Party Animals?
It all depends on who's going to be hosting it.
All right. Well,
Me and Slender were talking about that Friday after the Ascendant Art podcast.
All right, mate. Well, whatever you're doing, have fun. Thanks for being here, buddy. Take care.
Yeah, yard work. Yay, fun.
Bye, man.
Oh, Lord.
So, Gary, tell us about what you're showing here.
Well, I just wanted to share this because this is what the 82nd Airborne was doing. This is the film No Better Place to Die, produced by Tom Hanks and directed by Dale Dye. It's not been made yet. They're still working on it with Apple Plus right now.
Okay.
That's my logo right there. Right there.
Nice.
I designed that. And I storyboarded and did the production art for the film. And this is just one of the most exciting things I've ever gotten to do. And it's one of the most emotionally exhausting things I've ever done because every single page of that script is based on real shit. And when I got to certain moments, I had to get up and walk away because I got so emotional about it. Because the 82nd Airborne actually had to go in and they had to stop these Panzer tanks, these Tiger IIs, from crossing this bridge at, Murderay River. And which is really, there's hardly any water out there. It's just mostly flat land because it floods every once in a while. It's a floodplain. And it's some of the bloodiest fighting that took place on D-Day other than Omaha Beach.
Yeah. I look forward to talking to you about that more, mate. We're going to have to get you on a show just to talk about that.
And it's got, what's his name's involved with it too? Gary Sinise is involved.
Oh, I love Gary. I'm going to talk about Gary a little bit later as well because of what he's doing this week. But no, let's talk about
I
that.
just wanted to share that with you.
No, let's get on the let's
How do I close that?
Hang on. There you go. It's going. We'll have to get you on the show to talk about that specifically, just that, what you're doing.
I'd like to. I hate it now. I got to go too because I've got a show to do with Don Ecker, and so I got to prep for it.
All right, mate.
Man, it's been a crazy day.
Well, indeed.
Meetings with, hey, there's some of my food. Because this, what is this place called? Talk Studio Streamlabs. They don't allow my NVIDIA filter, so my American flag doesn't show up. It's just my background.
Oh well, you still look gorgeous, though.
So
Thanks for
anyway,
being
I'm
here,
going to get
buddy.
out of here, guys. I wish I could have been here longer because this is one of my favorite subjects, and I'm going to miss talking about the Vichy because those guys were assholes.
So you can always watch it later and laugh, laugh hysterically.
Well, I probably will, but it annoys me what they did because, and what pissed me off more is how Hollywood, that includes British filmmaking, have all taken part in covering that up.
Yeah. Well, we will hopefully get to talk about that. I've got a lot more to talk about as well, but thanks for being here, brother. Appreciate it very much.
You bet, man. I'll talk to you guys later. See you, Joe. See you, Pope. See you, Tucker.
Take care, brother.
Go
Don't get in no
subscribe to
trouble.
Pop
I know it's
Culture
hard for
Minefield.
you.
Pop Culture Minefield. Go subscribe, everybody.
Do it
All
now.
right. See you later, Brian.
See you, mate. Thank God he's gone. No,
Yeah, finally. Jesus
Man,
Christ.
we had a great show doing the Midway thing earlier today, man. It really was fun.
I know. I couldn't do Midway full justice. I do want to talk about it a little bit soon. We'll finish talking about D-Day first, though, and the beaches. I wanted to talk about each of the beaches.
That picture is incredible too. When
Which
you look
one
at
is this one?
just stuff as far as the eye can see.
Which one is this one? Which beach?
This, I believe, is Omaha, but we're going to talk about each beach individually. But I think this is Omaha. or Utah. It's a U.S. one for sure.
I was fixing to say, didn't Omaha have cliffs? Didn't we already?
Yeah, but we haven't got there yet.
Oh,
so
okay.
these are just actual images of stuff before we get to talk about each beach separately. But it just gives you a feel for what's going on, you know. So imagine coming off that, eh?
Oh man,
Yeah.
dude. I mean, if you've seen the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan, those guys had to be scared out of their minds, man.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
Oh, incredible. But we'll talk about I wanted to talk about the beaches just in order a little bit, with Omaha at the end, because that was probably the most ferocious one, although Juneau was pretty close for the Canadians. There's the actual Canadian flag, hopefully, that Tim will approve of, that little flag there. Yeah, so all 5 beaches also split up into sections. First of all, on the extreme right-hand side, we had Sword, I believe, was the first one. So Sword Beach, British forces, British 3rd Infantry, some French and British commandos. Before midnight, there was 60th Airborne Division in a glider assault, seized a number of bridges and artillery. They had a tough job getting off this beach. There were 600 dead and wounded in the end.
And those glider troops took an absolute beating.
Yes, they did.
Because one of the nasty surprises the Germans had was they basically took a bunch of logs and pounded them into open fields for the gliders, and a lot of them ran into them coming in.
Yeah.
Oh,
and they were supposed to take Ouistreham and then move down to link up with the assault on Caen. So they were the extreme right-hand flank. This is an actual picture of that beach. I'm coming off onto it. So Sword Beach. Now Juneau was the Canadian. This is also Sword. Beg your pardon. This is Sword. You can see a lot of wounded being carried and moved up. Slightly later, because a lot of the boats are docked already. So Juneau Beach was the Canadian beach. 14,000 Canadians landed on that day. There was 21,000 Canadians in total involved. Canadian 3rd Infantry Division and 2nd Armoured Brigade. They did take the beach by the end of the day. So it was ferocious, but they succeeded in their objective. There was also 15 fighter and fighter bomber Canadian squadrons. I want to emphasize a lot of Canadian involvement in this. You know, they sacrificed a lot. And they had some of the hardest fighting to go through once they were off the beach as well. But this is the actual. Now, I mean, would you want to own that house? I wonder how much that house was worth at that point. So realistic. Can you imagine the realtor adverts? Beachfront property. It's quite an interesting photograph because it shows you, what it takes to get off that beach. It's a pretty narrow beach, and then you got to get up the wall. Everything was tough. There was no, hey, this is a walk in the park. And they were under fire at first, but a lot of deaths. A lot of Canadian guys died in that.
And of course, people will always say, like, "Oh, well, there's staircases and stuff in the seawall for people to get down." Yes, right. And if you're a machine gunner, you know exactly what's on the other side of that.
That's right. What you're not seeing here is the mines, the wooden emplacements to stop tanks and troops, and all the other traps that were built, and these are all gone by this time, along with most of the town behind them.
Yeah.
But how do you got to get the tanks up the wall, across the wall, barbed wire. Tons of barbed wire, yeah. So that was Juneau, the Canadian beach. Then Gold Beach. Now, this is the one I have a personal connection with because my Uncle Bill landed on Gold Beach, the British 50th Infantry Division, and he was in the Royal Engineers, who were the first off because they had things to do. So my Uncle Bill was in the Royal Engineers, landed on Gold Beach that day, and I have been there a couple of times to see everything that he talked about Fascinating stuff. I was
The
there.
engineers were busy little beavers on that morning.
That's right. First time I was there was the early 1970s, very early 70s. This is my Uncle Bill, who's in the Royal Engineers. He's a sergeant in this picture. He wasn't a sergeant before he landed on D-Day. He was a sergeant by the end of the day. And he said the only reason that happened was that once the fighting would die down a bit later in the day, one of the officers said, has anybody brought any tea? And he'd brought tea and sugar and milk. So he got promoted, he said, to sergeant.
It's field promotions. You got to love them. Yes.
So I salute. He was a wonderful guy. He didn't talk a lot about it, as a lot of these guys do, but he did enjoy showing us Aramanches and the beach that he landed on and some of the gun emplacements and stuff. I just wanted to shout out my Uncle David as well, who's pictured here with two of my cousins. He was in Italy at that point. He was fighting in Italy when all this was happening. My father as well, who was in the Royal Air Force, God bless him. He didn't take part in any of this because he was still a trainee at that point. So he didn't do any of the missions involved. But he was 17 in this picture. So.
Wow.
Speaking of field promotions, I mean, I was reading a story about, from this battle of a British paratrooper who started that morning as a corporal, and by the end of the week was a lieutenant.
That's right. So field promotions are a thing. And
yeah, they are.
Happened a lot that day.
Well, the guy who used to be in charge is dead now. So here you go. You're it until you're dead, or I find someone better.
Now, this handsome guy sitting with the big socks pulled up and wearing shorts is me. I think I'm about 10 years old there. This is one of the tanks in Aramanches at the Gold Beach.
Nice.
My little sister next to me. So what a nerd. What a nerd. Look at him. But yeah, we visited that. There are other photographs, but a lot of family members.
Tens Rock fan.
Tens Rock fan. That's right. And it was in the 70s, though. But yeah, we saw one of the gun emplacements I showed earlier. I've actually been at. But yes, there was my Uncle Bill. Salute to him for surviving that day. I did want to say that he has a story. He had a story to tell, which is true, a true story. He was even interviewed on the BBC years later for a radio show, because he was living and working in Calais for the rest of his life. He stayed in France. Well, he went back to England briefly. Then he said, "I survived. I landed in Normandy in D-Day, and I didn't get captured by the Germans, but then I moved to Calais and I was captured by a French woman." He married a French woman and never came.
Never came home.
And you see the footage of them in the war, like all these troops and liberating these towns, and the first thing they do is start chatting up the French girls.
Of course.
I mean, what else are you supposed to do?
Right.
So well done, Uncle Bill. He not only conquered the Germans, he conquered the French too. So
As God intended.
Yeah, as God intended. Lovely guy. But that was Gold Beach that he landed on. So that's why I feel a close personal connection to this stuff, having been there as well. So anyway, Gold Beach. Now they did that probably Gold. Yes, it was tough. Like there was no easy beaches, but they did capture it relatively quickly, the beach, and moved off the beach relatively quickly. And this was where they built big fake or artificial port. Mm-hmm. The Omaha and Utah raids were designed to eventually reach Cherbourg for the deep water port there, but they had to have a port to bring stuff in till then. So that was their aim, was not only capture this and link up to go get Caen, the town of Caen, or Cone, but build this, secure it so they could build that port. So they did that rather successfully, although again, many thousands were wounded or killed. So, but then we moved to the two American beaches. I'll actually talk about Utah first. Forgive me if I just... these are some of the Gold Beach photographs, I think, actually. So he may be in here, my uncle. There's Aramanches, where I visited. You can still see they've left all the Phoenix caissons out there and so on. They're still there today, I think. quite a wide beach, so there was quite a range of landings across that beach. It's very fascinating to visit if you ever get the chance. But then Utah, let's talk about the two American beaches. First of all, Utah, U.S. 4th Infantry, 17th Tank Battalion, 14,000 airborne and 12,000 troops focused on Utah that day. Over 3,400 losses eventually.
Yeah.
So it was a tough one. Not necessarily as tough as, so this is Utah Beach, I believe. Let me just, forgive me, I have not annotated all the photographs prepping for these shows stuff, but
and according to the map, I'm wrong. My grandfather was at Utah Beach, apparently.
He's at Utah.
Because he was at Veerville. So.
Okay, Veerville. So this is Utah. This is he may be in here because this is an actual Utah.
It's entirely possible.
Yeah. As is this. This is a Utah. A lot of them, again, the rough seas, dropped off too far out, many of them, with the landing craft. A lot of guys drowned or had to be dragged out of the water, weighed down with stuff. So that was a big problem, not just the fact they were getting shot at.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're getting shot at while your gear is actively trying to drown you.
Yeah. So, and they had some tough walls to get up as well. Not the cliffs of Omaha, which were even worse. So Utah Beach, that was big American landing. But Omaha, which is the one, of course, you see in Saving Private Ryan, Band of Brothers, many other shows. Omaha Beach, probably the most brutal of all of them. Bloody Omaha.
Yep.
The defenses were almost intact, so the bombing and naval bombardment had not destroyed them. Cliffs had to be surmounted, and so they got stuck at the bottom of the cliffs for hours, if not longer. Just a nightmare. They had the worst of everything to face, I think.
And if I remember correctly, the plan for Omaha was they were going to use a bunch of the duplex drive Shermans to come up on the beach and start suppressing the defenses and taking out some of the bunkers.
Yeah.
And unlike other beaches, literally every one of them drowned in the channel. So it had no tanks.
Yeah. The whole thing was, as it's portrayed in the movies, it was bad. Mm-hmm. Losses were high partly because of the landing craft. It dropped too far out, but then the ferocious assault of undestroyed guns. And 6 hours after landing, they're still stuck at the bottom of the cliff. And this, of course, is the big red one.
This is the first ID.
Yeah, so quite the battle.
And I think almost half of the casualties suffered by the entire American forces during the operation were right here on day one.
Yeah, 3,000 within the first 6 hours.
Which is insane.
Which is probably a large part of that within the first hour, in fact.
Well, when you look at how invasions are staged, if you're in the second wave, like you're anticipating like being able to move up the beach very quickly and then meet up with your guys that have already secured a foothold, kind of. Yeah. And then the ramp drops and you're looking at the entire first wave dead.
Yeah. I mean, they were dying stepping off the landing craft. In fact, they were swimming to the beach and getting picked off. It's just horrible. Those guys, I mean, we have such privileged lives when you look at what these boys and all these beaches, but this one in particular went through. It's quite the thing.
There's a reason why they call those guys the greatest generation. There's a reason why they call them that. I mean, wow. That's
So I watched been watching a lot of stuff this week, and I've shed a few tears here and there. It's quite the thing, you know. Mm-hmm. I don't know how you can get over that. I don't know if you ever would if you survive, but PTSD wasn't a thing in those days, of course.
No, it was shell shock back then.
You were just supposed to man up and deal with it, you know.
It was called shell shock back then.
Most guys could, but some of them, you know, they had guys that were literally just catatonic.
Yeah, these are the. It's just. I think you said it, Pope. This was the first U.S. Army First Infantry Division, the big red one.
Big red one.
Yeah, this is real footage. The photographers that did this. There's a number of documentaries you can watch where they talk about them. The filming and photography is incredible. The guy that did this was shot and lost most of the footage he'd taken, but he got a couple of shots like this. And this is Omaha in the end, I believe. But once it was taken, but what a brutal struggle. Well, I think there was more than 9,000 Allied troops killed in the first 24 hours. I don't know how many Germans, because a lot of Germans were killed.
I think the slide said somewhere between 4,000 and 9,000 German dead.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So, what an incredible thing. Oh, I forgot. Sorry, back to personal stuff. I should point out my father-in-law, my sadly missed father-in-law who died a few years ago, was currently in a German prisoner of war camp when all this was happening. So, so I've got a lot of family connections with this war. He spent 4 years in there because he was in the Dieppe landings in 42.
God, that raid.
Yeah, he survived those landings, which were really a test run, one of the first test runs for this stuff. And
it did not go well.
Did not go well.
In fact, when they were planning Overlord, a lot of the British commanders and Canadians were pointing at Dieppe going like, do you remember the last time we tried this?
That's right. So he was sitting in a prisoner of war camp because he was captured at Dieppe. But this shows you what they had to face just physically in terms of they had to get up these cliffs and through all these emplacements and guns, and they had some of the paratroopers trying to take them out from behind, and I salute them. I salute those guys. Just incredible. Yep. This is one of the photographer who got shot. This was one of the few surviving photographs because he lost a lot of them from the sequence before he got shot, showing the guy and he's in the water as well, taking this photograph. It's incredible. I think it says it all. So, yeah, and as Courtney says, her ex-father-in-law was also a POW at that time. So, yeah. So incredible stuff.
Up a fun character of Sabaton even did a song about him. He was a captain in the Polish resistance that willingly got himself sent to Auschwitz so he could report back on what was going on in there, and then willingly went back in.
Damn.
Yep, that's some of these guys, the things that they did. Incredible. I mean, there's tons of great documentaries out there with real guys in them.
Well, I mean, even I think the officers that he was reporting to were like, wait, you want to go back after what you just told me? You want to go back?
Yeah. Man, I tell you, I wish I'd have gotten to when me and Christian got together in New Orleans, we went to the World War II Museum, and I didn't get to go to this part of it. We were only there for a day, and we hit two places. We hit the Pacific Theater building, and we hit the Holocaust building. And some of the stuff, it's crazy, man. I highly recommend, if you're into this kind of stuff, go down to that World War II museum.
Yeah, I went there once.
It's something else.
It's great.
Yep. You can't do it in a day. It'd take you a good 2-3 days to get through that whole place just once.
So I do want to point out that the principal weapon that won the landings on Gold Beach or Sword Beach for the British was this weapon that they deployed. So the fearsome bagpipes.
The bagpipes.
He had a rocket launcher in there too.
That's some mad jack shit right there.
Yeah, imagine you're a young 16-year-old German conscript sitting there and you see that and hear that, you're like, shit, I'm done for.
Wasn't he the guy who deployed with a longbow and a freaking and a sword as well?
Yeah, John Churchill.
Yeah. Mad Jack.
And also
imagine being a German gunner or whatever, and like all of a sudden your friend takes an arrow in the face, and you're just like, what century is it?
I've got this one too.
Vive les Alliés! If you ask me, Flanagan, there's a lot of very peculiar blokes on this beach.
So the great Sean Connery in The Longest Day.
Great movie.
Yeah. So just tell us about the Vichy stuff that Pope that you were talking about.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of stuff gets made about the Free French and, you know, helping to liberate France and all of that, which they did. That's absolutely true. But what gets swept under the rug throughout most conversations in World War II is mostly the remnants of the French government from the pre-war days that were actively working with the Germans and helping them to round people up and send them to camps. And also, like somebody brought up, they had their own SS unit.
Yeah.
So the French can take credit for both sides of that conflict, and they're only the second worst group of people I'll mention here.
It's a complex matter in some ways, though, because obviously, when a nation as large as France, there have been people who would have sympathized with the political philosophies of the Nazis. And also, though, there were people who just imagined that, well, this is the new normal now. We're going to be run like this forever, because the war, they didn't see the Allies winning again, like the position. And there was a lot of people probably thought that maybe such an invasion wouldn't happen like Normandy, and it would be a deal, and a deal would be done, and Germany would rule Europe forever. But so some of them may have thought along those lines. But yeah, it doesn't. When so many people sacrificed in the true resistance in France.
And the good news is, you know, they mostly got what they deserved in the end.
Yeah. I may have said the Yahtzee word there by mistake, but we are talking in a historical context.
The bad German people.
I can trim that bit out.
The spicy Germans.
I think we're talking. Say it once and get away with it.
Well, it's a World War II historical stream,
right?
I mean, come on.
We got to talk about who they were fighting, people.
Before we move on to Midway, because I do want to talk about Midway for a while, being the 82nd, I did want to say once again, Gary Sinise, who I absolutely adore, helped participate in sending off a bunch of World War II veterans, 68 of them, to take part in the 80th.
Not many of those guys left, man.
Yeah, I don't have the audio playing, but it's incredible. There's still there actually are more left than I imagined. I thought maybe we were down to our last handful. There are a few more, but there's still a minimum 96. I think is the
96.
youngest.
96.
Wow. I think, and 107 is the oldest. But God bless them, and it's great to see them going over there and taking part in these 80th celebrations, whatever you want to call it. It is a celebration in a sense, celebration of victory.
I think my favorite story of one of these was the 93-year-old who took part in the 75th anniversary by putting on the kit he had in 1944 and recreating the airborne drop.
Yeah.
At 93.
Get out of here. That's
incredible. Yeah, but so Gary Sinise Foundation is one of the sponsors of that trip. It's great to see that happening. I know there are British and Canadian and many other allied forces that took part still have veterans, and they're all going to Normandy for the 80th. And you know, so many of them are so old now, and there's not many left to tell the true stories. They're real stories. So we should still treasure them while they're here. So
to quote your boy Sean Connery, they beat back the goose-stepping morons.
Indeed, they fought for a real cause that was worth fighting for.
Yeah.
So
they call them the greatest generation because we don't all speak German because of them now. It's pretty good.
So let's talk a little bit about Midway then. Not about, I mean, I've seen all the movies and documentaries, but not a battle I know as much about because I have less personal connection with it. But that's why you guys are here, to keep me straight. So Battle of Midway, I guess, like if invasion of Normandy was the turning point of the beginning of the end of the Germans in World War II.
Oh, yeah.
This was the beginning of the end of the Japanese Empire.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was kind of the the turning point in the Pacific War because the Japanese carrier fleet after this would basically cease to exist. They had two more, I think, that would count this for a number of years after, but the Kido Butai, the force that struck Pearl Harbor, well, 2/3 of it sank on this day. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can see the 4 heavy carriers that were sunk. The
Yeah.
Kagi, the Kaga, Hiryu, and the Soryu.
All 4 of which had been located now, I believe. It took them a few decades to find it, and I'll see if I can pull that up. But they've found all of the carriers involved in this battle, I believe.
Damn.
Yeah. And it's funny, they outnumbered the Americans only had 3 heavy carriers.
Yeah, and we were lucky to have 3 because Yorktown had been heavily damaged at Coral Sea, and basically the Navy or the yard chiefs were telling the admiral that she was going to need 6 months in a dry dock, and Nimitz just turned around and went, "Yeah, she's leaving in 3 days. Do what you can."
3 days, and you go. So I don't care if you use wood. We're leaving in 3 days.
Jesus Christ.
But quite a different battle when you consider it was mainly an air battle.
Yeah,
Carried out over hundreds, if not thousands, of miles.
yeah. Just the battlefield was hundreds of miles long, and
Yeah.
finding the other fleet is actually the hard part, and almost didn't happen,
Yeah.
except for one of the few engagements by surface forces where USS Nautilus had tried to torpedo one of the carriers, and due to our torpedoes not working correctly, didn't. Got spotted by a Japanese destroyer, led her off on a merry chase when she was trying to kill it, and that destroyer, basically giving up the chase and sailing back towards the main force, was actually what guided our dive bombers into the main Japanese fleet.
Yeah, and Midway itself, of course, which the battle is named after, is just what, tiny atoll?
Yeah, it's just this tiny little island in the middle of the Pacific. That's how it got its name. It's the midway point between Hawaii and Japan.
I think it's slightly, as you see here, it's northwest of Hawaii. And I mean, here it looks like nothing, but I think it's something like 1,500 miles northwest.
You see that?
It's a long distance.
You see that one? I served on one of those atolls. You see the one
Johnston
south of Midway? That's the one I was on. Johnston Atoll.
Is that the one that tipped over?
You could have. It was only 2 miles long and half a mile wide. I don't think Midway is much bigger than that either.
The only thing that made Midway even slightly important was the fact that it was big enough to put an airfield on.
Yeah.
We when I was in the Coast Guard, we were traveling to Southeast Asia, and we went from Hawaii to Guam, and we almost got to stop in at Midway. I was really disappointed, actually.
Yeah, it would be an interesting place to see.
Oh yeah, I mean, even just a look.
It would be easy to miss it. It's very small.
Yeah, pretty much.
So I wanted to show this picture because this is the extent of the Japanese Empire at that time. For context, it wasn't just that Japan.
Places.
Japan had basically annexed Korea many years before. I think the Koreans are still sore about now. Taken over large parts of China, Manchuria. They'd moved south into Hong Kong, Burma, Thailand. All that stuff in red. They were on the point of potentially invading Australia. They were that far south.
If it hadn't been for American victory at Coral Sea, they probably would have tried to invade Australia directly.
Yep.
Probably wouldn't have gone well, considering the number of lethal animals, let alone the
Pioneers would not have taken kindly to the Japanese invading their empire.
No, of course not.
So
the emus are 2-0 against the Australians. So I don't know what the Japanese would do.
And they'd extended all the way out to these atolls and islands, and of course Pearl Harbor had hurt America naval. So there was potential that they could have got taken Hawaii, moved up to the Aleutian Islands. There's all sorts of things could have happened.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So something had to be done, and that's something the Americans had to force an engagement that that had to take out a lot of the Japanese Navy.
And let's be clear, everything went right for them because we were outgunned numbers wise, technology wise. All their stuff was better, and it was just the intelligence group that worked on planning this out, figuring out what the Japanese were doing. They were a big part behind the scenes of actually pulling this off.
And the simple fact that we'd broken their naval codes.
Yes.
Well, so that's a thing I wanted you. Yeah, you know more about this. The details.
Basically, they had. We knew that they had a plan to attack a major installation in the Pacific, and there were 3 possible locations it could have been, and they were using code phrases for each one. So in order to figure out what target it was, we sent out basically like supplier maintenance issues from these 3 positions. Each one was supposed to report a different issue in a code that we knew the Japanese had broken, but they didn't know we knew. So, of course, I think one station was supposed to say that, like, their desalination plant had broken down.
Yeah, the water pumps. Yeah,
something like that. And that ended up being the one that we intercepted a transmission from the Japanese. Hey, water supply issues at target blank. I forget. I think it was target AK. Was that, and that's how they knew it was Midway. So we were able to put our entire carrier force.
I think it was AF.
Either AK or AF, and I can never remember which one. But that basically enabled us to do, like I said on Gary's stream, of basically allowing Nimitz to gamble the entire Pacific War on a pair of 5s.
Yeah.
Robert's got some good info though that he's been posting. Thanks for being here, Robert. And the US had more. I think we saw earlier on the map of forces. They did have more ships overall. I mean, it's interesting. Would they have politically have invaded Australia or Hawaii? Maybe that would have been too much for them.
I don't know that Japan could really sustain that until they knocked China out of the war, because most of their army was busy in China. Yeah,
because they were stretched pretty thin, and it wasn't like they had the world's largest population or materials. So, and cutting off their materials was a big part of the Allied strategy after Pearl Harbor, cutting off supplies to Japan for shipbuilding, whatever. So, what about So the battle happened over like a 3-day period, 3rd to 6th.
Yeah, just about.
With the 4th having a lot of the activity. Tell Pope, you as I say, you're more knowledgeable than me. The Japanese made a decision at one point to rearm their aircraft.
Yes, they were debating. They had just figured out basically that there was an American carrier group operating in the area. And they were debating whether or not to either send a second wave at Midway or call them back down to the flight to the hangar decks, rearm for naval attack, and go after the carriers. And Admiral Nagumo made the choice to rearm and go after the carriers. And unfortunately for him, ended up being the wrong call, because that was right when the American air attack struck, and all of their planes. Well, not only were all their planes getting fueled and reloaded, but all of the ammunition magazines and things like that were all open.
Exposed. The whole thing was exposed because they were switching armaments on the planes.
Exactly the right time.
Yeah.
So are you saying really there's an element of luck in the timing of that?
Oh, yeah.
Huge amount.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those strikes probably would have disabled most of those carriers or crippled them pretty heavily, but it probably wouldn't have sunk all 4.
No. So am I right in saying, though, that the Japanese struck first with an air assault on Midway itself?
Yes.
Yes.
But
that was their objective, was to take out the airfield on Midway.
Yeah. But the American aircraft carriers around Midway, they then counterattacked.
Yeah, they were. It was basically a big cat and mouse game for a while, just like Coral Sea was, of both carrier forces trying to find the other one and then stage an attack. And it almost didn't happen. In fact, most of the strike planes from, I think it was Yorktown, ended up having to ditch because they ran out of fuel. they had to stay up for too long trying to find the enemy fleet.
Mhm.
And most of them volunteered to stay up there and keep looking, even though they knew it meant they'd have to ditch and probably not make it back.
I do like this image though, because it shows the distances involved.
Yeah, so
Two and a
long
half
way.
thousand miles from Midway to Japan. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so I think the result for Japan was 4 carriers, the 4 heavy carriers destroyed, 250 plus aircraft and their pilots.
That
Yes.
was the real thing, is they lost
Yeah.
all of their really experienced naval pilots in one day.
Yeah.
And
That-
unlike the United States, who had a policy of basically if a pilot was very successful and or, one of our best, we would take him off of combat patrols and put him on training duty, basically teaching new guys how to deal with that, how to deal with the Japanese. And the Japanese didn't do that. Their best pilots would stay on the flight line until they were inevitably killed.
Yeah. So it's tough to recover from that loss of experienced manpower.
Now, am I correct in assuming that a lot of those planes that they lost? I mean, I know a lot of them were lost because they were changing armaments and went up in the explosions, but some of them they lost because they had nowhere to land once their carrier was gone, right?
Yeah. Well, it's like, what do you do? You ditch.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that could be the middle of nowhere.
Mhm.
Well, and we did lose USS Yorktown, but that was also days later, so they were able to recover their planes, and the ones that they weren't able to recover were able to land on other carriers. Whereas for the Japanese, there were no more carriers left for them to land on.
They had some light carriers, but I don't know. I'm not a naval guy. I don't know the difference.
They would be able to land there, but only some of them. The
Yeah.
carriers just couldn't handle that many planes, so they would have had to ditch next to the carrier and then hope you can get picked up by a destroyer or whatever.
So this is just a graphic showing the major 4 heavy aircraft carriers, 1 cruiser. This is what the Japanese lost: 320 planes and over 3,000 sailors and airmen killed. And I can imagine for any sailor to have your ship sunk in the middle of the Pacific under you must be a hellish experience, even if you survive the actual sinking.
Yeah.
I've a lot of tales of American sailors in the Pacific who've been sunk and getting picked off by sharks and so on or if indeed they ever were rescued. It must have been hell. It's a hellish thing again for a human being to go through. I can't imagine.
Well, we're not meant to be out there.
No,
that's not the part of the world we're supposed to be in.
Yeah,
We're not built for that.
317 U.S. sailors, airmen, and Marines killed. So,
and that's just in addition to the normal hazards of just being on the ocean, because the ocean hates 3 things more than anything else: living creatures, moving objects, and metal.
Yeah.
So we put a big moving box full of living things in the water and then expected the sea to be okay with it.
So the U.S. lost 150 planes. Was that largely through being shot down or in air-to-air?
That was largely the torpedo squadrons, because the torpedo bombers we were using were pretty outdated, and they, to the point where I think only one of them survived out of the 3 squadrons launched.
Because June the 4th was a key day. Swapping of hits on carriers, but 7:15 a.m. as you see there, the Japanese planes begin changing weapons after their first wave of attacks. The timing of that, oops.
Yeah, and it wasn't necessarily the wrong call, because when it comes down to when you're looking at it from the Japanese point of view, an aircraft carrier group is a much bigger threat than that island airstrip that had outdated aircraft on it that weren't really much of a threat at all. So that was normally would be the right call, except exactly the same time, well, the American airstrikes started hitting the carriers.
Okay, so Robert saying that a lot were picked up by destroyers, but they lost a lot more at Santa Cruz, which is not a...
Yeah, that was later in the year, supporting Operation Watchtower, the American Marine invasion of Guadalcanal.
Yeah. However, an incredible events.
Yeah, and essentially set up the course of events for the Pacific War, where from then on we could go on the offensive, safe in the knowledge that we would have an advantage, and that the Japanese could not just move a massive carrier force into place.
So, yeah, exactly. I mean, it was a turning point, like D-Day, a big turning point. So, what I wanted to ask, and I did have, it's just we'll talk about the movie portrayals of Midway. I've enjoyed both movies, both the major movies. There's more, obviously. There's a lot of other documentaries and smaller movies out there, but I thought they've both been pretty good. What do you guys feel about the accuracy? And I know Robert might have something to say in the chat. The accuracy of these movies, how well are the events portrayed?
The 76 movie is not very accurate, but it is a good movie and very well acted. The newer one is very actually historically accurate.
So that would be this one.
Yes.
Yeah, the 2019
Patrick Wilson
movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Add that to the list of things to watch.
Yeah,
I watched it for the first time this morning. You'll enjoy it, man. It's like Pope's saying. This one's a lot more accurate historically. It shows all the events, including the change of the weapons and all that stuff. Brian will remember this. I remember the first one being extremely loud because it was in Sensorround.
I saw it in the cinema at the time. And
me too. It was old dog fighting footage, which is always cool. But man, that movie was loud. But it had an all-star cast, and it was a good movie.
It was exciting. I remember at the time thinking it was very exciting, and I didn't know as much about the Pacific stuff because a lot of my relatives, as we've seen, were in the European War. I didn't have any. So all we knew was whatever we see in movies or in documentaries.
Yeah, I just don't think they needed that whole subplot with Charlton Heston's son having a girl interned into one of the camps and everything. That was kind of dumb. But other than that, it was a great movie, man.
I guess the volume of the movie is nothing compared to the volume of you actually being there.
Right?
I'd imagine that.
Yeah, imagine what those guys, those U.S. sailors and airmen had to go through in terms of that.
Vince Womack, I brought that up this morning, the final countdown.
Yes.
Brian, you need to do that on your show for one of your science fiction shows.
Funny,
man.
I did write that down the other day thinking, you know what, we need to do the final countdown.
Kirk Douglas, man, the final countdown. Yes.
So this is a great documentary, though, if you ever see it, The Battle of Midway, the true story. It's got a lot of the real footage. It's quite a good documentary. So
once again, if you go to the World War II Museum, they have a room where they show, I think it was a good 10 minutes worth of footage just from the deck. It's just a stationary camera on the deck of one of these aircraft carriers during a naval battle. And it is something to see, man. It is really cool looking. It's in black and white, and they show it on a wall, and it's a huge wall. You know what I mean? It's like 2 stories tall. And it's almost like being there. I think that's the whole point of the video. You know, you're just walking through, checking out stuff, and one wall has the deck of an aircraft carrier getting, shells hitting it, part of it getting blown up. And you can tell part of it's built with wood. You can tell it's not metal. It's wood flying through the air. You know what I mean? It's crazy.
So, I mean, there's some incredible footage out there. And I think both those movies and that documentary are very much worth watching. I think we must salute the bravery of those airmen and sailors who took part,
especially being in one of the maintenance shops or whatever during these battles, because you're below decks doing your thing, and all of a sudden your anti-aircraft guns start going off. And that's never a good sign.
So 82 years ago, those brave guys, I'll say guys, not trying to be prejudicial, those brave guys went through that, and we thank them for it. I did want to talk a little bit about, first of all, I want to go back to D-Day. My good lady wife pointed out to me this story, which is on the National Post Canadian newspaper, which is actually one of the ones that's reasonably worth reading, about a Canadian guy who died on D-Day. He'd actually Archie McNaughton, there's a name for you. He
Yeah.
had served in World War One, but he signed up in 1940 when World War II started and fought all the way through World War II until D-Day, where he died. He'd re-enlisted at 43. Canadian chap, Major John Archibald McNaughton of Black River Bridge, then died on Juno Beach in June the 6th, 1944. What a story.
Mm-hmm.
Multiple sacrifice of one guy. He'd left home on June 7th, 1940, when he re-enlisted at 43. He never saw home again. So
Yeah.
So that's the kind of story that just gets you right here when you hear it. And
Yeah, man, it was a different mentality. It was a different time. I mean, I don't know if I told you about this before, Brian, but one of my friend's fathers died within the last decade, and he needed me to show up and be a pallbearer. And I knew he was a pilot. That's how we met. You know, he was in the Air Force, and you know, I knew his son. And my gosh, this guy tried to get into the military 3 times at the age of 15 to join the Marines.
Yeah,
during World War II.
It's incredible, isn't it? Yeah,
he was trying to get in.
But
you know,
and that was a common thing too. A lot of British, especially, I know.
Could you see teenagers doing that today?
They were really 15 years old, but they were saying they were 17 in order to be able to join.
Oh yeah, it happened all the time. Yeah, this guy's daughter said years later, Margaret recalled her mother saying, with grim finality, "No one survives 2 world wars."
Yeah,
he'd survived the first one. Now all the shit that happened there, only to die in D-Day. But it describes it. You know, the small landing craft in which the men came ashore bucked and heaved in choppy, swelling waters, making so many of the 28 soldiers on each craft seasick in heavy woolen uniforms and 22-kilogram backpacks, which is like 60 pounds.
Yeah.
Some drowned when they jumped into deep water. Others were caught up in the barbed wire lining the beach or fell victim to the landmines or the punishing and deafening artillery fire in which they were obliged to charge directly.
Yeah.
So that's... Yeah, they actually led his men off the beach, but he was shot in the town of Tailleville. I can't pronounce that French.
Survived the beach landing and got killed in the town. Wow.
One of 359 Canadians to die that day. So, and there's his grave in the war cemetery at Berny-sur-Mer in Canada. So I salute him and everybody else like him.
Mm-hmm.
Well played.
Imagine, especially guys like him, he didn't have to sign up. He didn't have to go back.
No.
He'd already done his bit in the First World War, which was horrific enough on its own.
He's volunteered, and many Canadians did.
Yep.
If Britain was in danger, they were still close to Britain.
And knowing blue-collar Canadians like I do, he probably said something similar to, "Oh, Germans haven't learned their lesson yet, eh?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll fix that."
Indeed. So that's
aren't there stories out there of World War I Americans actually going to Canada to join the military there?
A lot of them did,
because we weren't involved yet,
World
right?
War I, but early in World War II as well. We were technically a neutral country, so we couldn't condone our citizens joining the places like the RAF and things like that. But they were forming Canadian squadrons, some of whom had rather Texan accents.
Right.
In fact, I believe one British officer was quoted as saying, "Funny, we didn't know Texas was part of Canada."
Texas was almost a part of England, so
make it for last time. Could be. They could have claimed they were from Alberta. I mean, it's
true. Yeah.
That's what I wanted to do today, though. I mean, my imperfect knowledge of history, I still wanted to pay tribute to these guys. In actual fact, I've even got a couple of little clips to show of the cemeteries in Normandy where many thousands of these guys are buried. This is the Canadian one. This is a little the Canadian veterans.ca made this. And they have regular ceremonies there.
Wow.
Yeah, just a little something. But of course, there are also the equivalent of other Allied forces and cemeteries there.
Mhm.
Here is the British one. British War Memorial in Normandy, as well as many troops that are buried near there. Someone, I wish I'd taken the name of who did this on YouTube, but somebody posted it on YouTube. It's quite a nice tribute, a nice memorial, you know. And thus we must not forget the Americans who are buried there. Oops. So let's have a little tribute to those guys.
That is the saddest song in the world.
Yep.
And I hear it right here at 9 o'clock every night from the Air Force Base.
This is the Normandy cemetery where the Americans are buried. It's very emotional. This was on the 75th.
Yeah.
There will be similar things happening, obviously, this June the 6th.
I have no doubt.
I salute them.
That's Thursday, huh?
Those brave lads. Thursday, yeah. And I like the memorials there, and the graves are well kept, well maintained. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things with the American one there that I read that they do, I guess they take sand from the beach in Normandy and rub it into the names to make it stand out from the white back or the white of the tombstone.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's quite something. I wish I could. I mean, I've been there. I didn't see any of that when I went. I was just a kid, but did see the beach.
It's on my list of places to go. I mean,
I have to go there at some point, and I wish I could go to some of the places my granddad who fought in the Pacific went, but some of them are off limits to Americans.
Yeah.
Like Iwo Jima, I could probably go to if I really wanted to, but I'd have to prove that my granddad served there and was all. It's a whole big thing to even get to go there, but it would be an incredible thing to see.
Yeah, Normandy is well worth a visit for many reasons, not just that. It's a beautiful place, and but for that alone, it's something. And I'll be looking forward to seeing what's happening on Thursday in terms of remembrance.
Yeah,
there with all those remaining veterans there, and we won't have them for much longer. That's for sure. So
no.
Yeah. Thanks for being here, Lord Thoth. He's got to run, but we're wrapping up anyway. Didn't quite get to the D-Day movies and how accurate they are, but obviously The Longest Day is a great one. The Big Red One is a great movie.
And the funny thing with The Longest Day is a lot of the guys who were in the movie were also on the real D-Day.
Well, Richard Todd, who's a British actor in the movie, a famous British actor of the 60s and so on, the 50s, 60s, he was one of the first officers to land in Normandy on D-Day, and he's in the movie. So,
yeah.
It's docudrama style as well. It's slightly too big a cast because everyone gets like 2 lines, kind of thing, but you saw Sean Connery in it there, but it's a great movie nonetheless. A Big Red One is a great movie, 1980, low budget independent, following the first U.S. Army 1st Infantry Division through North Africa, Sicily, and then D-Day. And Samuel Fuller, who directed that, was an actually decorated member of the First.
Wow.
So he knew what he was talking about when he
That's
directed
gonna
that
be an
movie.
interesting experience. Like, it's like, oh, do you want to direct a movie? Great. What's it about? Oh, it's about the 1st Infantry Division.
That's right.
Let's
Yeah.
go look at the big red
I
one.
mean, the one that I was in,
doing it.
he got decorated for.
Let me see that script real quick.
That's
Yeah.
right. Obviously,
Anybody got a red pen?
Which,
I mean,
sorry.
no, go ahead, mate. Go ahead.
Fuck, now I'm blanking on the name. Yeah, I don't remember.
Oh, don't worry about it. But Saving Private Ryan, we're all aware of that famous opening sequence, which let's give full kudos to the
Mr.
filmmakers
Spielberg
there.
put us
Yeah.
right in the middle of it.
That
One
I
of the-
imagined is what it was like. when
Well, I
saw
mean,
it.
a lot of World War II veterans that went to see that movie were absolutely shaken by it. Like, some of them had to
Get up and
because
leave.
They were having
And
a
these are
breakdown.
tough guys, man. Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
And they did a pretty good job in Band of Brothers too, which is they're both Stephen E. Ambrose related properties, Saving Private Ryan and Band of Brothers. But that was more from the paratrooper perspective in Band of Brothers
Right.
and what they went through the 101st. There's a great British movie from '75 called Overlord, black and white movie about following a young Yorkshire guy through signing up and then landing on D-Day. And then some of the stuff I had in my opening montage was from a Canadian show called Storming Juno, which is on YouTube if you watch it. It's about the Juno Beach. So again, it's actors portraying people. It's like a docudrama kind of thing. So
Yeah.
and there's many others. So Tim's seen Overlord. I can't say it's a happy movie, but it's pretty realistic, showing the average British grunt.
I remember what I was going to say. Oh, speaking of actors, I wonder what Christopher Lee was doing on D-Day. I know he's in Africa.
Killing Nazis somewhere.
Yeah,
I said that word again.
Killing the
the
goose stripping morons.
Him and his cousin Ian
Get back
Fleming.
to your Scottish accent there, buddy.
I'll tell you what's speaking of D-Day, it's actually it's related. One of the things that the Americans did during World War II, and Japan did it as well, is occupational currency. And after we took France, following D-Day, we issued some for France, and De Gaulle was not happy about that. I collect a bunch of them. I got a couple of them from Italy that got writing on them from presumably soldiers.
De Gaulle was not happy about many things, but I'll say one thing for De Gaulle. He was very tall.
Well, silver linings, I guess.
Thanks, Robert. Robert's provided a lot of great stuff, so thank you for being here, Robert, and
I
watching
would
this show.
imagine a lot of the places in Pacific that we fought over can probably only reach by boat now.
Probably,
Some
I
of
know
them
that's I know that's the way Johnson Atoll is. They leveled all the buildings when they mopped up out there in '97, and
Some
it's
of
just a
these-
big piece of coral out there now.
Some of these are the most incredibly remote places on Earth.
The only reason they were ever important is because they could have an airfield, which would
They had
not
an airfield.
generate
That's it,
the-
exactly. Yep.
So, I'm sure we all agree that it's a very different show for us to do, because normally we're doing, movies or music or whatever. But I felt
It's an important show to do.
couldn't let this pass. And I
No,
know with my
you got to
family
remember it. That's just like 9/11. You got to remember it, or history will repeat
If
itself.
we don't remember it and the people
That's
behind us don't, then they'll forget what these sacrifices were made for, and there were sacrifices.
Oh yeah,
big ones were made. And I had to do something because I have family connections, and I've always been into this stuff. And
hey,
feel it very
I'm the
deeply.
third. Joe Senior was with Patton at the Battle of the Bulge. He didn't land in Normandy, but he was with him.
I'm fighting the Bulge now, but that's a different battle.
Aren't we all? Yeah,
That's another interesting movie as well.
that comes with age, bro.
Maybe we'll do some of these movies in future, but thank you everyone for being here in the chat and your contributions. Really appreciate it very much. I hope you've appreciated the show. We've tried to keep a little bit of humor in it, not to be too sad, but when I watched those videos of the cemeteries and the ceremonies, I was actually didn't do it here, but was kind of weeping a bit when I was watching them earlier. So,
What an inflatable tank make you feel better?
It did. Yes, I want one.
Pope some links to some inflatable tanks.
That's amazing.
Oh, we have a late super chat. Thank you, Christian, for that. Keeps the lights on here. I don't have a job, so I got to earn some money somehow. Christian Delorme's vinyl revival for 10 Canadian dollars. I had to chime in. The military has a special place in my heart. I call it the ultimate civil servants, indeed, and they're the least rewarded ones.
Yeah.
I never passed the medical, but always gravitated to vets. I love it so much. It grew in my son. And yes, glad to see that he's serving in the Canadian Army. Thank you, Christian. And we need good kids to keep serving, and hopefully for the right reasons and for the right.
And that actually became a joke among the British Army. Was what about the SA-80 was they called it the civil servant because it doesn't work and you can't fire it.
That's right. So I have to play once again for Christian the ultimate war weapon.
At the balls.
The ultimate weapon of war. There, forget your broadswords. Forget your your longbows.
I mean, if you're the Germans, what do? You just like, no, I'm going home.
Well, the thing is, surely they could. I'm
Guy's
going to
playing
shoot
the bagpipes.
I'm going to shoot for the guy strangling a cat. I mean, the other troops are going great. They're going to shoot at him. I noticed he was too much of a coward to wear his kilt, though. I mean, that salt water would have been very invigorating.
Oh, yeah, especially in the middle of June in the Atlantic. That's probably a good 50, 60 degrees warm.
Yeah. I can see a lot of people in the chat, telling us that who their relatives they had in the military, and I salute them all. And thank you for sharing those. There's quite a few in the chat. I don't know, probably I'll miss quite a few followers in the Korean War, which I've been watching a lot of Korean War movies recently. Grandfather in World War II. We are the people. You're the people who will never let this stuff be forgotten. We'll probably do this again in future anniversaries. And with that, I would like to wrap up. Once again, thanks to everyone in the chat. Thanks to D. Bud Martin for all his modding. Thank you, buddy. Thanks for
the
everything.
ultimate wrench, D-Bud.
Yeah. Thank you to everyone like Robert who's been in the chat and giving us information. That's I'm going to keep a note of that. Battle of Midway by Simmons, Shattered Sword.
I've read Shattered Sword. It's excellent.
Yeah, I've not read those two, so thank you, Robert. I will check those out. So just quick round the houses. Pope, what are you up to in the next few days?
Well, really just my weekly show over on Rumble, Midnight Mass on Saturday evenings, where I'll play some music for you guys, usually stuff that either we've been talking about on this show or Christian's show, mixed in with some newer stuff I want people to hear, some classic stuff that I enjoy, and whatever you guys send in as requests. So hopefully you'll join me for that. And I do actually have a new episode of Rock and Roll Religion I dropped yesterday on Lord of the Lost with Riding Raven. I finally finished editing it, so
cool. It's good.
Now you dropped that here or on
Rumble? I'm doing all of my content over there now.
Yeah. Check out shows Midnight Mass. I was hanging out in the chat the other night, and
we got a good crew for that. It's a pretty
good one.
It is like the best name for a show ever, too.
That's because he's the Pope, man.
Exactly.
He is the Pope. Thanks, Pope, for being here and for all your info, buddy. Really appreciate it, brother. Thank you.
No, thanks for having me. This is important.
Indeed. Joe, another brother from another mother.
That's right.
How are you, buddy?
I'm doing fantastic. And like I said, I'm sorry I was late today, but Ryan was by himself, and he doesn't do well by himself. So Anime showed up at the end, and that's when I was able to leave. But yeah, man, thanks for having me. You guys just go to my page and see what the schedule is. But I did start another channel. It's called Joe's Atmosphere Rerun. And I'm just taking like 5-6 minute videos out of my live shows from the main channel, and just to drive traffic over there.
Wish I had the energy to do that. I applaud you.
Yeah, all you're doing is clipping things out, and I've got a generic start and finish that I stick on either end. And
I'm
Just
not
let-
watching all this again just to figure out which bit.
If I feel like a moment's good, I pull it out and I throw it on there. So,
I would like to welcome to the stream my sister for the first time I think I recall seeing her in the chat. So, hi sis, how are you? Love you. Not watching live, but would like you are watching live. This is live. We're still live.
Yeah, we're still here.
The weather guy Stag who decided on the window for attack came from Dalkeith in Scotland, our hometown. So the main weather guy said, "Yeah, Eisenhower, Ike, go for it."
There you go.
Dwight, it's this. I'm telling you, you can do it. He was from our hometown, so well played. Good
Very
to
cool.
see you, sis. Yeah, that was very
Yeah,
interesting.
thanks for letting me hang out, dude. It's always good to hang out with you guys.
Yeah,
Always.
thanks for being here, brother.
And you should remember this every year because it's a great thing.
I
to
do.
talk about.
I've done little videos in the past, but this year I thought I'll do a live stream. So
yeah.
Trucker Rob, mate, thanks for joining us.
No problem. I appreciate you inviting me by.
Oh no, anytime. You're welcome in future or anytime you feel like it, or it's something you would like to talk about. Anything? Are you up to anything?
Well, I play tabletop games with Pope on Rumble. It's the Verdant Mint channel. Sometimes I talk about precious metals and bullshit. But if you like, people playing D&D or 40K type games, we have some fun over there.
Cool.
Pope likes to crash things into things, and
Yeah, I like to
Okay,
crash
nice.
ships and then punch people in the mouth.
yeah,
That's how to win. That's the way to win.
yeah, pretty much.
Well, thanks, Rob, for being here, mate. Appreciate it. It's always good to talk to you, and you can welcome back anytime.
Well, if y'all ever do one on Vietnam, let me know.
Maybe.
It's kind of a rough one for people, but my grandfather was in Vietnam, and my great uncle as well.
Yeah, well, we'll reach it eventually, one way or another. That'll be something. But thanks also to Roman of the Empire and to Gary from Pop Culture Minefield and Imperatus for being here too earlier. Thank you again to everybody in the chat, both on Rumble, which was Vince and Joe in the chat, because I had to keep an eye on it. And thank you to everybody here on YouTube in the chat. Next show up for me, well, later on tonight I'll be on Comics Division Monday Night Meltdown. There'll be other shows during the week, and I'm working on a couple of videos. I won't be doing Bourbon and Boarding this Saturday night, not because my team lost and are out of the playoffs, but because Brahma will be in Dallas for the meetup. I don't think I'm going to be there, but I'm going to take a Saturday night off then. So no Bourbon and Boarding, but next Monday we will have a show leaning towards a Death Race 2000 show. So,
Oh wow!
There we go.
How many points do you get for driving through the emergency room exit? What was it again?
Quite a few, but should have been more.
When is the Dallas meetup anyway?
It's YouTubers meetup around Fan Expo.
Yeah, but I'm just saying. Do you know what weekend in
Gary,
June it is?
It's Saturday night.
It's this Saturday.
Yeah, it's going to be in Carlton, where I used to live for a while in near Dallas. My sister Karen again coming with the info, and it's true. I remember this. The small village of Garliston in Dumfries and Galloway, where my father's family are all from, was used to practice the Mulberry Harbour stuff. So, fun fact. So so next Monday we may be doing Death Race 2000. I haven't quite made my mind up yet, but so stay tuned for that. Thank you again, everyone, for being here. Have a great day. Once again, I salute all our veterans, not just D-Day and Midway, but all of them. Thank you all for your service. Thank you to the families of those veterans for the sacrifices that they made to keep us free and safe. May those sacrifices never have to be made again, but if they do, I hope they're made for the right reasons. But thank you again to everybody for those things. We do appreciate all of that stuff. Have a great week, everybody. Take care and keep on rocking.
Hasta.